be me, 34, community organizer and keynote speaker at progressive conferences across the country. Literally just spent last weekend giving a speech to 800 people. Standing ovation, women crying. Felt like I was changing the world. This is my calling. This is my purpose. Helping women unlearn the patriarchal conditioning that's been forced on us since birth. My focus is relationship structures, consent frameworks, bodily autonomy, not a blogger or podcaster or whatever. I do real work. Get paid decent money for it too, though Dominic contributes most of our household income. Dominic is my husband of 7 years, together for 9. He's fine, supportive, does his thing in finance while I do mine. We have Olivia. She just turned 5 last month. Threw her this big birthday party, unicorn theme, invited all her little friends. Dominic planned most of it honestly. He's good at that stuff. I was busy preparing for a conference in Portland. Anyway, everything was going normally, until 3 months ago. Dominic suddenly says he wants a divorce. Completely out of nowhere, blindsided me. I'm standing in our kitchen and he just drops this bomb. Says he's been unhappy for years, feels like we're not compatible, needs something different, doesn't elaborate much beyond that. I'm thinking, are you fucking serious right now? I'm out here doing important work and you're having some midlife crisis. But fine, whatever. If he needs to go on some journey of self-discovery, I'm not going to beg. I'm a strong, independent woman. I literally teach other women how to advocate for themselves. Filed the paperwork, got lawyers involved, decided to keep things civil for Olivia's sake. I told him I'd make this easy. We'd do 50-50 custody, split assets fairly. Thought this would be over in a few months. Then his lawyer requests a paternity test. I'm sitting in my lawyer's office when she tells me. Feels like the floor drops out from under me. My lawyer, Patricia, she's this sharp woman in her 50s, looks at me over her glasses. It's standard in some divorces, she says, especially when significant child support is involved. But I know Dominic. He's never been suspicious, never questioned anything about Olivia. This has to be coming from his lawyer, not him. Some scorched earth legal strategy. I text my best friend Simone immediately after leaving Patricia's office. Tell her about the paternity test request. She's appropriately outraged on my behalf. That's so fucking controlling, she writes back. He's trying to assert ownership over you and Olivia. Exactly. This is exactly the kind of patriarchal bullshit I speak about. A man feeling entitled to police a woman's body, even retroactively. But here's the thing. There's this tiny detail I've never told anyone. Not Simone, not my sister, certainly not Dominic. The timeline with Olivia is complicated. Back when I got pregnant, Dominic and I had been together about 4 years. Things were good mostly, but I was feeling restless. I'd reconnected with James, my ex from college, on social media, just friendly at first, catching up, remembering old times. James had been my first serious relationship. We dated for 3 years, broke up after graduation when he moved to Chicago for work. Always wondered what if, you know. That's normal. Everyone has those thoughts. Anyway, James and I started texting more frequently. Then he mentioned he'd be in town for a conference. We met for coffee, then drinks. Then we went back to his hotel. It happened once, maybe twice. Okay, it was actually a few times over, about 2 months. He kept coming to town for work, and we kept meeting up. It felt electric, exciting, like being young again. Dominic and I had fallen into this comfortable routine that felt more like roommates. With James, I felt seen, desired, alive. But I knew it wasn't sustainable. I was building a life with Dominic. We were talking about marriage. James was still in Chicago, not looking to relocate. So I ended things with James, told him it had to stop. He understood. We both knew it was just scratching an old itch. Then 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I did the math in my head, approximately 1,000 times, and it could have been Dominic's. We were still having sex regularly, even if it felt mechanical. It could have also been James's. Genuinely 50-50 odds, maybe. I decided it was Dominic's. I chose to believe that. It felt true in my gut. And even if there was doubt, what good would it do to say something? Dominic was thrilled when I told him. proposed 2 weeks later with his grandmother's ring. We got married 4 months before Olivia was born. Beautiful ceremony in his parents' backyard, very traditional. His family is old money, very conventional. They loved me, though. I was the educated, accomplished woman their son was building a life with. When Olivia was born, she had Dominic's eyes. Or at least I told myself she did. She had dark hair like both Dominic and James. Fair skin like all three of us. There was nothing definitively pointing either direction. Dominic never questioned it, never even seemed to wonder. He was besotted with her from the moment she arrived. Up at night with bottles, changing diapers, singing to her. Honestly, better at the infant stage than I was. I was recovering from a traumatic birth and trying to get back to my work. Took only 8 weeks of maternity leave before I was back at events. And had to. My career was hitting its stride. The years passed, and I just never thought about it. Olivia was ours. That was all that mattered. The biological details seemed increasingly irrelevant, and my work evolved too. I became more and more vocal about challenging traditional relationship structures, gave speeches about how monogamy is a patriarchal construct, wrote articles about how we need to reimagine commitment and fidelity. Honestly, a lot of my thinking crystallized because of my own experience. I had stepped outside my relationship and the world didn't end. I grew from it, learned about myself, brought that energy back into my partnership with Dominic. So really, everyone benefited. The relationship I had with Dominic after James was better than before. I was more confident, more sexually open, more myself. Dominic got the best version of me, and none of it would have happened if I'd stayed in that suffocating, monogamous mindset. My whole platform became about this, challenging the idea that women should be sexually exclusive to one partner, that we should suppress our desires to fit into these rigid structures. I spoke at universities, at community centers, at national conferences, told women they could want more, could explore their sexuality. That desire doesn't end just because you signed a marriage license. The key, I always said, is communication and honesty. Couples need to talk openly about their needs. Establish clear boundaries and consent. Monogamy is fine if everyone truly chooses it without coercion. But most people, especially women, are pressured into it. They never question whether it's actually what they want. I was helping women ask those questions. Question everything they've been taught about relationships, sex, commitment, unlearn the patriarchal programming. My speeches always emphasized honesty, though. I'd say things like, radical honesty is the foundation of ethical non-monogamy, and we have to be brave enough to tell our partners our truth. People would come up to me after events, crying, saying I changed their lives. Women telling me they finally felt permission to want what they wanted, to stop performing this version of femininity that demands sexual suppression. It felt important, meaningful. I was doing real work to shift consciousness. But with Dominic, I never told him about James. It wasn't relevant to tell him. It was before we were married, technically. We hadn't explicitly discussed exclusivity at that exact moment. And what purpose would it serve to bring it up? It would only hurt him. And for what? To make myself feel better by unburdening my guilt? That's selfish, actually. The compassionate thing was to protect him from information that would only cause pain. That's what I told myself. That's what I knew was true. And the thing about Olivia's paternity, that was the same logic. Dominic loved her completely, and she loved him completely. Biology is just this arbitrary thing we've decided matters. It's more patriarchal shit, honestly. This obsession with bloodlines and genetic legacy. Real parenthood is about who shows up, who does the work. And Dominic showed up every single day. So he was her father in every way that actually counted. The fact that I'd had a brief thing with James that may or may not have overlapped with Olivia's conception, it was irrelevant. Just biological data points that didn't change the reality of our family. I genuinely believed this. I built an entire philosophical framework that supported this belief. Wrote speeches that got interrupted by applause when I talked about how we need to decenter biological ties, how chosen family is just as valid as blood family, how the nuclear family structure is a capitalist invention designed to consolidate wealth and control. And I meant all of it. It wasn't like I was being hypocritical. I was living my values. I just wasn't broadcasting every private detail of my life. There's a difference between hypocrisy and having boundaries. Everyone is entitled to privacy. Just because I'm a public figure doesn't mean I owe everyone access to my entire history. Anyway, when Patricia told me about the paternity test request, I felt this wave of panic, but I pushed it down. Told myself it would be fine. Olivia was probably Dominic's anyway. I'd always believed she was, mostly, and if by some chance the test said otherwise, well, we'd deal with that if it happened. The court ordered the test. It wasn't optional. I had Olivia's DNA collected at a lab, felt sick the entire time. She was confused about why we were there. Mommy, why do they need my spit? I told her it was just a routine thing for the divorce. She's 5. She doesn't understand what divorce really means yet. Just knows that Daddy lives in a different house now. The waiting period for results was 2 weeks. Longest 2 weeks of my fucking life. I threw myself into work, had 3 speaking engagements scheduled. Gave a keynote at a women's conference in Denver about sexual liberation. Talked about how women need to stop apologizing for their desires. How we've been conditioned to make ourselves small. How radical self-honesty is the path to freedom. I've got another standing ovation. Sold out of my merchandise table. Flew home, feeling powerful and validated. Then got the email from Patricia. Results were in. Court date scheduled for the following week. I felt my stomach drop again. Called Simone, needed to talk to someone, couldn't tell her. The truth, though, just said I was stressed about the divorce proceedings. She was supportive, told me Dominic was being vindictive, that this whole paternity test thing was a power play. I agreed. Let her villainize him. It felt easier than examining my own choices. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed running through scenarios. If the test confirmed Dominic as the father, everything would be fine. Divorce would proceed normally, I'd be vindicated. Dominic and his lawyer would look petty for even requesting the test. If the test said he wasn't the father. I couldn't even finish the thought. Told myself the odds were good. Dominic and I had been having regular sex when I got pregnant. It was probably his. Probably. Got up at 5 a.m., couldn't stay in bed anymore, made coffee, reviewed my testimony for the other aspects of the custody hearing, put on my armor, black blazer, white shirt, minimal jewelry. I know how to present myself in professional spaces. I've testified before city councils, spoken to hostile audiences. I can handle a courtroom. Patricia met me outside the courthouse. She had this look on her face, sort of pinched. Have you reviewed the results? She asked. I shook my head. I wanted to hear them with everyone else, I said. Which was a lie. I was just too fucking terrified to look. She gave me this long look. We should talk before we go in, she said. My heart was pounding. I'd rather just get this over with, I told her. She didn't push it. We walked into the courtroom together. It's smaller than you'd think, not like on TV. Dominic was already there with his lawyer, Stephen, this guy in an expensive suit. Dominic looked tired, older than I remembered. We'd been avoiding each other during the separation. All communication through lawyers. Seeing him now, I felt this complicated rush of emotions. Anger, resentment, nostalgia, fear. He didn't look at me, kept his eyes on the table in front of him. The judge came in. We all stood. Formalities, case number, who's present. Then we got to it. Stephen, Dominic's lawyer, addressed the court, requested that the paternity test results be entered into evidence. The judge agreed, asked for the documents. Patricia got a copy, I got a copy, Dominic got a copy. I held the envelope in my hands. My fingers were shaking, couldn't open it for a moment. Looked up and saw Dominic had already opened his. Watched his face as he read. Saw the color drain from his skin. Saw his jaw clench. Saw his eyes close for a long moment. Then he looked at me for the first time. And the expression on his face. I've never seen someone look at me like that. Like I was a stranger. Like I was something horrible. I forced myself to look down at the paper. Tore open the envelope. Pulled out the document. There was a lot of text, technical language, but the relevant part was highlighted. Probability of paternity, 0%. Dominic is excluded as the biological father of the child. Words swam in front of my eyes. I read it again and again. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. This wasn't possible. I'd been so sure, or at least I'd convinced myself I was sure. The courtroom was silent. I looked up and everyone was staring at me. The judge, the lawyers, the court reporter, Dominic. Especially Dominic. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Literally could not form words. My throat had closed up. The judge asked if I needed a moment. I nodded, unable to speak. She called a 15-minute recess. Patricia grabbed my arm, pulled me out into the hallway. "You knew," she said. "Not a question, an accusation." I shook my head frantically. Found my voice, barely. "I didn't know," I thought. "I thought he was the father." "Who's the biological father?" Patricia asked. Her voice was cold, professional. She was already calculating how this changed everything. Someone I was involved with briefly, before Dominic and I got married. "Does Dominic know about this person?" I shook my head. "Jesus Christ," Patricia muttered. She was angry, I could tell. I'd kept this from my own lawyer. Made her walk into court unprepared. "We need to figure out our strategy," she said. "Does the biological father know about the child?" "No," I whispered. "It was over before I even knew I was pregnant." "Where is he now?" "Chicago, I think. I haven't spoken to him in years." Patricia was typing notes into her phone. "This changes the entire custody arrangement," she said. "Dominic has no legal obligation to this child now. He's been her father for 5 years." I said, my voice rising. "He's raised her. He loves her. You can't just—" "He can just," Patricia interrupted. "He's not biologically related and you weren't married when she was conceived. He has no legal responsibility unless he chooses to maintain it." I felt like I was going to throw up. And this couldn't be happening. Dominic wouldn't abandon Olivia. He couldn't. But he loved her. She was his daughter. Biology didn't matter. But I knew, even as I thought it, that I'd broken something fundamental. That the man in that courtroom who looked at me with such disgust, he wasn't the Dominic I knew anymore. I'd turned him into someone else. We went back into the courtroom. I sat down, still couldn't quite feel my body. Everything had this unreal quality. The judge asked if we were ready to proceed. Stevens stood up. He didn't grandstand, didn't get dramatic, just calmly laid out the situation. His client had been deceived about the paternity of the child for 5 years, had provided financial and emotional support under false pretenses, was requesting full termination of parental rights and responsibilities, no custody, no visitation, no child support. My lawyer objected, argued that Dominic had acted as the father for years, that Olivia knew him as her father, that it would be devastating to her to lose that relationship. Stephen countered that his client was the victim of fraud, that no one should be forced to maintain a relationship built on deception. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but Patricia had told me not to say anything. Let her handle it. So I sat there, silent, as they debated my daughter's future. The judge asked me directly, did I know Dominic was not the biological father? I had to answer this under oath. I said I wasn't certain, that I'd hoped he was, that I'd believed he probably was. The judge asked if I'd been involved with anyone else during the relevant time frame. I said yes, briefly, before Dominic and I were married. She asked if I'd told Dominic about this. I said no. She asked why not. I said, God, what did I say? Something about not wanting to hurt him with information about the past, that it hadn't seemed relevant. The judge's expression was unreadable. She asked if I'd ever suspected Dominic might not be the father. I said I'd considered it was possible but believed he was. She asked if I'd ever considered getting a paternity test to be certain. I said no. She asked why not. And I had no good answer. Said something about not wanting to introduce doubt into our family. It sounded weak even to my own ears. The judge thanked me and asked to speak to both lawyers in chambers. We waited in the courtroom, Dominic and I at separate tables, not looking at each other. The silence was suffocating. I kept trying to catch his eye, wanting to. What? apologize, explain, but he wouldn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, jaw tight. After 20 minutes, the lawyers came back. The judge returned. She delivered her ruling. Dominic would have the option to maintain parental rights if he chose, but was not legally obligated to do so. She gave him 1 week to decide. If he chose to terminate his rights, I would have full custody and would need to identify the biological father for child support purposes. She also noted that Dominic would have grounds for a civil suit for fraud, emotional distress, and reimbursement of child support. Recommended I consult with my lawyer about potential liability. Then it was over. Court adjourned. Everyone stood, started packing up. I tried to approach Dominic. He turned away, started talking to Stephen. Stephen actually stepped between us. "My client has nothing to say to you," he told me. His voice was polite but firm. "Dominic, please," I said, trying to see around Stephen. "We need to talk about Olivia. She needs you." Dominic finally looked at me. "You don't get to tell me what Olivia needs," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was so much anger underneath. "You've been lying to me for 5 years about who she is. She's your daughter," I said desperately. "She loves you. You love her. Biology doesn't matter?" He cut me off. "That's really what you're going with? You of all people?" And I realized what he meant. He'd been to some of my talks, early on, heard me speak about reimagining relationships, challenging patriarchal structures. I'd talked about honesty and communication and radical transparency, and I'd been lying to him the entire time. "You've built a career telling other people how to live authentically," he said, "how to challenge societal norms and be honest about their needs. And this whole time you've been lying to my face every single day." "I didn't lie," I said weakly. "I just didn't." "You let me believe she was mine," he said. "You let me fall in love with her, build my entire life around being her father. And you knew there was a chance she wasn't. You knew, and you never said anything." "That's lying." He was right, and I knew it. But I couldn't admit it. Couldn't let myself sit with what I'd actually done. "Dominic, I thought she was yours. I really did." "Did you?" he asked. "Or did you just decide it was easier to believe that than to deal with the truth?" I had no answer. He shook his head. "I don't know who you are," he said. "I thought I married someone honest, someone principled. But you're just a hypocrite. You tell everyone else to live authentically while you've been living a lie." Then he walked out. Stephen followed him. I stood there shaking. Patricia touched my arm. "We should go," she said gently. We went to her office. She laid out the reality of my situation. Dominic would almost certainly terminate his parental rights. I'd need to contact James, the biological father, pursue child support from him. Dominic would likely sue me for the costs of raising Olivia. Depending on how vindictive he wanted to be, I could be looking at significant damages. And there was another problem. My career. This would come out. The woman who speaks about honesty in relationships, who advocates for ethical non-monogamy and radical transparency, got pregnant with another man's child and hid it from her husband for 5 years. The irony was not going to be lost on anyone. Patricia was right. Within a week, someone had leaked the story to a feminist blog. Not the full details, but enough. Prominent relationship activist revealed to have misattributed child's paternity. The comment section was brutal. My own community turned on me instantly. Women who'd supported my work calling me a fraud, saying I'd set the movement back, that I'd confirmed every stereotype about feminists being dishonest. I tried to do damage control, released a statement about how this was a private family matter, about how no one is perfect, and we all make mistakes. That my message about challenging patriarchal structures was still valid. Even if my personal life was complicated, it didn't matter. 3 conferences canceled my speaking engagements. A university rescinded an offer for a visiting lecture position. The feminist organization I'd been working with asked me to step back until things settle down, they said, which we both knew meant indefinitely. Simone was one of the few who stood by me, but even she said I'd fucked up. "You should have told him," she said over wine at my place. "I know the biological father thing is complicated, but the least you could have done was tell Dominic about the affair." "It wasn't an affair," I said automatically. "We weren't married yet." Simone gave me a look. "You were together, planning a life together." Whether or not you'd signed papers yet, you were committed. And you slept with your ex repeatedly without telling Dominic. That's an affair. I wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Everything I said sounded like rationalization, even to me. Dominic sent his decision through Stephen. He was terminating all parental rights. Wanted no custody, no visitation, no contact. Would not be pursuing a civil suit on the condition that I never contacted him again and that I wouldn't seek child support from him. I signed the agreement. What choice did I have? Then came the worst part. Telling Olivia, but she was 5 years old. How do you explain this to a 5-year-old? I told her that Daddy couldn't live with us anymore, that he loved her very much, but needed to go away. She cried, asked why, asked what she did wrong. I told her she didn't do anything wrong, that sometimes grown-ups make things complicated. She asked when she'd see him again. I said I didn't know. She cried herself to sleep for weeks, would draw pictures of the three of us, her family. I had to hide them because I couldn't look at them. I contacted James, found him through LinkedIn, sent a message. Hey, this is awkward, but we need to talk. When he called, I told him everything. There was a long silence after I finished. Then he said, "You never thought to tell me I might have a daughter?" I didn't know, I said. I thought Dominic was the father. But you knew it was possible, he said. His voice wasn't angry, just disappointed, which somehow felt worse. Yeah, I admitted. I knew it was possible. Another silence. I'm married now, he said finally. 2 kids of my own. This is going to destroy my wife. And I realized I'd just blown up another family. Not just mine and Dominic's. James's too. His wife, who had no idea he'd had a brief affair with his ex 6 years ago, who was now finding out he had a secret child. I apologized, said I didn't want to ruin his life. He laughed, bitter. Bit late for that. We agreed he'd get his own paternity test, just to be absolutely certain. He did. Results came back a match. He was Olivia's biological father. We set up a child support arrangement through lawyers, and he didn't ask to meet her. I didn't push it. What would I even say? Hey, Olivia, remember how Daddy left? Here's your new daddy, a stranger from Chicago. No, I kept her life as stable as I could, moved to a smaller apartment, couldn't afford the house without Dominic's income. Even with James's child support, my speaking career was basically over. The few events that still booked me were small, poorly attended. People would ask hostile questions, accuse me of hypocrisy. I'd try to defend myself, explain the difference between the personal and political. It never went well. Started looking for regular employment. Ended up getting a job at a nonprofit. Advocacy coordinator. Still mission-driven work. But behind the scenes, not public-facing, my boss knew about the scandal, hired me anyway. She said everyone deserves a second chance. I was grateful but also humiliated. This wasn't where I was supposed to be at 34. I was supposed to be ascending, not rebuilding from rubble. Olivia started kindergarten, had trouble making friends. Teacher said she seemed sad, withdrawn. Asked if there were issues at home. I said we were adjusting to a divorce. Didn't mention that her father had completely abandoned her, or that I was the reason why. At night, I'd lie in bed and try to make sense of it all. Try to figure out where things went wrong. But I kept circling back to the same thought. I didn't actually do anything wrong. Not really. I slept with someone I cared about before I was married. That's not a crime. I chose not to disclose it because it wasn't relevant. That's my right. Everyone is entitled to privacy. I believe Dominic was probably Olivia's father. I wasn't certain, but I believed it. And when I found out definitively that he wasn't, it was only because he demanded a paternity test. I would never have known otherwise. So really, this whole thing was his fault. If he'd just trusted me, if he hadn't demanded that test, we'd still be a family. Olivia would still have her father. My career would be intact. None of this would have happened. His insecurity and need for control destroyed everything. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. Because the alternative, that I'd destroyed everything through my own choices, that I'd prioritized my comfort over honesty, that I'd built my life and career on principles I didn't actually live by, that I was exactly what Dominic called me, a hypocrite. I couldn't sit with that, couldn't let myself see it. So I didn't. I built a narrative where I was the victim of Dominic's patriarchal need to control, of the biological father's inconvenient genetics, of a society that punishes women for sexual freedom, of my community's rush to judgment. I was the victim. I had to be. Because if I wasn't the victim, then I was the villain. And I'd spent my entire adult life fighting villains. I couldn't be one. Months passed. I settled into my new normal. Smaller apartment, lower profile job, single motherhood. Olivia slowly adjusted. Stopped asking about Dominic as frequently. Started calling James my other dad, even though she'd never met him. I didn't correct her. What was the point? My sister came to visit. We'd never been super close, but she was trying to be supportive. Over coffee, while Olivia was at school, she asked how I was really doing. I gave her the standard answer. It's hard, but we're managing, one day at a time. She nodded, stirred her coffee. Then said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure. Did you ever actually believe Olivia was Dominic's?" I felt my defenses go up immediately. "Of course I did." "Really?" she pressed. "Because from the outside, it kind of seems like you just decided it was easier to believe that. You don't know what you're talking about?" I snapped. "Maybe not," she said calmly. "But I know you, and I know that when you want something to be true, you can convince yourself of anything." I wanted to argue, but something in her words hit too close. I changed the subject. She let me. But the question stayed with me. Had I really believed it? Or had I just chosen to believe it? Was there even a difference? I thought about those weeks after I found out I was pregnant, how I'd done the mental math, the calendar calculations, remembering when I'd been with Dominic, when I'd been with James, how I'd concluded it could be either, but probably Dominic's. What did probably even mean in that context? 50.01% versus 49.99%. And if I'd really believed it was Dominic's, why did I feel that spike of fear when Patricia told me about the paternity test? If I was genuinely certain, wouldn't I have been confident? Even welcomed the test as a way to shut down Dominic's lawyer's fishing expedition. But I'd been terrified. Some part of me had known, and had always known. I pushed the thought away. I was getting good at that, pushing things away, not examining them too closely. It was the only way to get through the days. One afternoon, I was picking Olivia up from school. Saw a couple across the parking lot. Young parents with their kid, maybe first or second grader. The dad was carrying the child's backpack. The mom was holding the kid's hand. They were laughing about something. Just this perfect little family unit. I felt this rush of rage, irrational, consuming rage. They got to have that easy, uncomplicated happiness. While I was here, alone, vilified, my career destroyed, my daughters, father, gone. And for what? For sleeping with my ex-boyfriend before I got married? For not broadcasting every detail of my private life? It wasn't fair. I'd worked so hard, built something meaningful, helped so many women, and it was all taken away because of one mistake, one tiny omission. The universe was punishing me disproportionately. I got home and opened my laptop, looked at my old speaking page, all the glowing testimonials from women I'd helped. You changed my life. You gave me permission to want more. You taught me that I don't have to settle. That work was real. Those women's transformations were real. It didn't matter that my personal life was messy. The message was still valid. I started drafting a post about how we need to separate the message from the messenger, about how cancel culture is toxic, about how mistakes don't negate someone's entire body of work. Wrote 3 paragraphs before I deleted it. Couldn't quite make myself post it. Some part of me knew how it would be received, and I knew I'd just be digging the hole deeper. So I closed the laptop, went to pick up Olivia's toys, made dinner, helped her with homework, read her a bedtime story. She asked me if she'd ever see Daddy again. I said I didn't know. She asked if it was because she was bad. I said no, it was because grown-ups are complicated. She accepted this because she was 5 and didn't have a choice. I kissed her forehead and turned out the light, stood in her doorway, watching her sleep. This small person I'd brought into the world, who didn't ask for any of this, who lost her father because of choices I made. I felt something crack in my chest, something I'd been holding carefully together. Started crying, couldn't stop, slid down the doorframe, and sat in the hallway sobbing. For Olivia, for Dominic, for James's wife and kids, for everyone I'd hurt, for my career, my reputation, my sense of self, for the person I thought I was versus who I actually turned out to be. I cried until I was empty. Then got up, washed my face, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and kept going. Because what else was there to do? Weeks turned into months. I was at the nonprofit, doing my job, staying out of the public eye, trying to just exist. Then one day, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. Subject line, "An apology you're owed." Opened it hesitantly, expecting hate mail. I still got those occasionally, but it wasn't. It was from a lawyer, but not Patricia or Stephen. Someone new. The email was formal, brief. Requested a meeting to discuss matters related to your divorce settlement. Said it was in my interest to attend. I called Patricia, asked if she knew what this was about. She said she'd received a similar request. We should both go, she said. Met at a coffee shop downtown. The lawyer was a woman, probably 60. Introduced herself as Rebecca Chen, represented Dominic. I felt my stomach drop. He was suing me after all, after he'd said he wouldn't. Patricia asked what this was about. Rebecca said she wanted to discuss a discrepancy in the financial settlement. Pulled out a folder, spread documents on the table. Bank statements, transfer records, account information. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Rebecca started explaining. During the divorce, Dominic's assets had been valued at a certain amount. That valuation had been the basis for the settlement split. But there was a problem. Several of his accounts had been undervalued. Significantly, there were assets that hadn't been disclosed. Investments, holdings, accounts I'd never known about. Patricia was leaning forward, examining the documents, asking questions about dates, amounts, when these were established. I was still trying to catch up. I don't understand, I said. What does this mean? Rebecca looked at me. It means your ex-husband committed fraud. He hid assets during your divorce to avoid splitting them with you. I just stared at her. Why are you telling me? I asked. You represent him. I represented him, Rebecca corrected. Past tense. I no longer represent Mr. Daniels as of yesterday when I reported him to the Bar Association, she explained. She'd been hired by Dominic to handle the divorce. He'd brought her documents, account statements, asset valuations. She'd submitted them to the court in good faith. But recently, something hadn't sat right. She'd started digging, found discrepancies. When she confronted Dominic, he admitted he'd undervalued several assets. Told her he felt justified because I'd stolen 5 years of his life. That he deserved to keep what was his. Rebecca had immediately filed a disclosure with the court, terminated her representation of Dominic, and was now providing evidence to help me pursue a corrected settlement. Patricia was already making notes, talking about filing motions, pursuing additional discovery. I could seek damages, she said. Dominic had committed fraud on the court. This was serious. I could probably get a significant portion of those hidden assets, maybe more than half as punitive damages. She was excited, energized. This was a big win for me. But I felt numb, kept looking at Rebecca. Why are you doing this? I asked. She could have just resigned, didn't have to actively help me. Rebecca met my eyes. Because I don't represent frauds, she said simply. What you did to your husband was terrible. You lied about paternity, let him raise a child that wasn't his. That's reprehensible. I flinched. But what he did is also wrong, she continued. Legal fraud is still fraud. Two wrongs don't make a right. He doesn't get to steal from you just because you hurt him. She stood up. My firm will be sending over the complete documentation. Your lawyer will take it from here. Then she left. Patricia and I sat there. She was reviewing the documents, making plans. This is good, she kept saying. This is really good. We can work with this. But I couldn't focus because I'd just been outsmarted, completely, totally outsmarted. Dominic had known about Rebecca's ethics, had to have known she'd report him if she found out. He'd hidden assets during the divorce. Let me think I was getting a fair settlement. Let me walk away thinking I'd gotten what I was owed. And then, what? He'd planned for Rebecca to eventually find out. No. I pulled out my phone, looked up Rebecca Chen's firm, prestigious, well known for representing high net worth divorces, known for their ethics and discretion. Dominic would have known that, would have known she'd never participate in fraud. So why hide the assets at all if he knew she'd eventually discover it? Unless he wanted her to discover it. I thought back to the timeline. Rebecca said she'd recently found the discrepancies, started digging. How recently? I asked Patricia. She called Rebecca's office, got more details. Rebecca had flagged the issues about 6 weeks ago. Confronted Dominic 4 weeks ago. He'd admitted it immediately. Didn't even try to deny it. 6 weeks ago. That was right around when the story about the paternity test started circulating online. When I was getting dragged on feminist blogs. When my speaking engagements were getting canceled. When everyone was calling me a hypocrite. Dominic had watched all of that happen. And then he'd gotten himself caught committing fraud. Deliberately gotten himself caught by a lawyer who would have no choice but to report him. And help me. Patricia was still talking about legal strategy. But I was somewhere else entirely. Understanding clicking into place. Dominic had always been smarter than I gave him credit for. Quiet, understated, content to work in finance while I was the public figure. I'd thought of him as a supporting character in my story. But he'd been playing a longer game. He knew the paternity test results would destroy me publicly. He knew my career was built on a foundation of supposed honesty. Knew the feminist community would turn on me. He could have just walked away, taken his hidden assets and disappeared. I would never have known, but that wasn't enough. He wanted me to have something, wanted me to have this victory, wanted me to be able to pursue him legally, drag him through the mud the way I'd been dragged, have something to point to and say, see, he was bad too. He'd given me a villain, given me someone to blame besides myself. Given me a way to reclaim some kind of moral high ground. He wasn't perfect either. He committed fraud. It was a gift, a poisoned gift, but a gift nonetheless. And the genius of it, the absolute fucking genius, that was that I would take it. I would pursue those assets. It would tell everyone about what Dominic did, would use it to rehabilitate my image. Yes, I made mistakes, but look what he did. We were both flawed. Nobody's perfect in a divorce. I could already see the narrative forming. I could see myself using this to claw back some credibility. And Dominic knew I would. Knew me well enough to know I'd grab onto this lifeline, use it to avoid fully reckoning with what I'd done. He'd given me exactly enough rope to hang myself with, while simultaneously making himself look worse, taking himself down to lift me just high enough that I'd never hit bottom. Never have to fully face what I'd done. Never have to sit with the complete truth of my own hypocrisy. Because I'd always be able to say, but Dominic, it was brilliant, cruel, and brilliant. I sat there in the coffee shop. Patricia still talking about depositions and asset disclosure, and I understood. I'd been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, outthought by the man I'd dismissed as simple, trusting, conventional. The man whose worst trait I'd thought was being too traditional, too committed to patriarchal structures like monogamy and honesty. He'd known exactly what he was doing, had probably known from the moment the paternity results came back, had watched me scramble and suffer. And then, at the perfect moment, had given me exactly what I would want most: a way to avoid complete accountability, a distraction, an excuse. And I would take it. I was already taking it. Patricia was right. This was good for me. I could rebuild, not to where I was, but to something. I could tell people I was flawed, but so was he. Could create enough moral ambiguity that some people would forgive me. Come back to my events, listen to my talks. I wouldn't be the headliner anymore, but I could be on panels. Could contribute to anthologies. Could slowly rehabilitate my reputation. And all it would cost was the truth. The real, complete truth that I'd hidden from everyone, including myself. That I'd lied. Not by omission, but actively, deliberately lied. That I'd built my career on principles I didn't actually follow. That I'd hurt everyone around me in service of my own comfort. That I'd prioritized my image over my integrity. That I was exactly what Dominic called me, a hypocabite. I would never have to fully admit that now. Would always have Dominic's fraud to point to. We both made mistakes. Nobody's hands were clean. Divorce brings out the worst in everyone. Dominic had given me that out, knowing I'd take it. Knowing that in taking it, I'd prove everything he'd learned about me was true. That I'd choose the comfortable lie over the hard truth. Every single time. I looked at Patricia. She was waiting for my response, asking if I wanted to move forward with the corrected settlement, to pursue the hidden assets. I opened my mouth. Knew what I was going to say. Knew what I'd always been going to say. Yes, I told her. Let's do it. And somewhere, probably in his apartment across town, Dominic was smiling, because he'd known. He'd always known. Known me better than I knew myself. And he'd been right.